I'm so nervous to even do this. It's unbelievable. Man. Um, so when I like watching Asmongold React videos, got to be honest, right? But when I saw this video um in the feed, uh I knew I couldn't watch it. The reason for that is the title alone makes it a video that is absolutely perfectly engineered for me. Why is that? I have quite an extensive, intensive experience with the eSports scene. Um, I do not talk about it a lot since it is a thing way in the past. So, what I experienced as esports is vastly different from what esports is right now. Um, but one of the reasons why I definitely wanted to talk about this video and react to it is esports on mobile games. Once upon a time, in 2012, my nephew got a smartphone. And every fucking game had an esports competitive mode. And I was sitting there, shaking my head, playing my 6,000 games a month in StarCraft. And then he comes and says he is esports competitive when he plays like 2-3 games a day. And his game would have a season every other week. A fucking season. Like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, it's, it made no sense to me back then. Yeah, if you search for a season, like the first result probably will be, and I just remembered I'm on my main browser. I probably shouldn't type stuff into the URL. Um, but if you search for a season, um, you probably get at minimum the yearly seasons. Yeah. Uh, uh, fuck, I'm struggling. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter, right? That's it, right? Right? Not native English speaker here. But yeah. And how much time does each season have? And like on the calendar, each of those have at least 3 months, 90 days. So when a little chipmunk comes to me and says he has a new season every 14 to 19 days, like I'm sitting here and bruh. Another thing I want to highlight here is a thing. I will not go deeply into it, but it's highly it is in your face all the time, and that is the attention span of a person. There is this girl that once that once lived and made educational content about everything. Yeah, there's barely anything she didn't touch. Yeah. I do not know if how much she did in English, but English definitely was one of her targets. Um, she went a lot about different languages and stuff, using her methods to make it easier to learn different languages. But I definitely like the most the part she did about humor. How humor often is on the verge of the ridiculousness and reality. There's this little sweet spot that is different for everyone else. So that's why you don't laugh about everything. But the real pros, like any stand-up comedian. Like, they tickle that down between ridiculousness and reality, that it makes it really freaking fun. But what does it have to do with freaking pro gaming? Well, you need to make connections in order. You need to evolve the script. One thing that is bad about competitive scenes is everyone can copy everything. There is a method to the madness, and once you have figured out that madness, it's free game for everyone. The big sentence is metagaming. Meta stands for most efficient tactic available. Please note, I cannot write stuff correctly, so so this is the method of reaching your goal the fastest way possible. And not just the fastest, because fast often could mean that that you strain your muscles and stuff. Like, for example, in order to be able to run 5 miles, you will not instantly try to go for the longest way possible. You go to the area where you run as long, like, you want your muscles to be strained, to be to do more than they usually do, but you do not want to overuse your muscles. You want, like you have a green, yellow, and a red area, and you always want to tickle that yellow area. And the more you do it, and the more you get the feeling for how long you can tickle that yellow area before your muscle bursts and you have to lay down for a day or two. And to phrase it different, but also a different example, a fitness example, is weightlifting. A lot of people will tell you that it's not important how heavy it is that your weight is. It's more important to that you make a lot of lifts. That is the best way, not only to build muscle, but to also burn the calories that you don't want. So now we come to pro gaming, and how does that weave in? I have to talk StarCraft. I don't want to talk StarCraft. You know, when you have that ex-girlfriend, basically, that like you went out and you had a mutual breakup, but you at some point you want to get back together and stuff, but you know you can't, but you want to, but you can't. Did I save a unit test map? No. Let's go with something stupid. SAT control. SAT control gives you basically a troop of units, and you have to fight other units. Pretty simple. All you have to do in this game is, like I just said, you have to kill the enemy troops as efficient as possible. Because this is an up to 4 player thingy-majig, and once you beaten your opponent, you will be facing more enemies at the very end. So what you want to do is find out what are the best units to crush your hostile army as best as possible, and maybe even so strongly that you can carry your teammates, while keeping in mind that this game can go on for quite a long time. So upgrades will become important at some point. For example, a Marine has a certain amount of hit points. He does a certain amount of damage. And one of the easiest way to kill a Marine is a Baneling. Because a Baneling does 35 against light. He has 45. Let's enhance it. Can we get shields? No. Normally the Marines would get a shield that would give him 10 extra HP. 55. So let's use a different aspect real quick. We take a normal Zergling. A Zergling does 5 damage. If you would hit a Marine that has 0 armor, the Marine would need 9 hits to die to a Zergling, or many Zerglings. So, but by giving a Zergling a +1 upgrade, the Marine will die much faster. In fact, we can do the math hyperficially without hard testing, like it's 9 hit. So it's +1 is 6, 30 for 5 hits, and then we have 3 more, makes 8 attacks. Suddenly we are 1 attack faster. This 1 attack can snowball into many attacks being suddenly not needed to be applied to the enemy. Same in the return. The most obvious normal most obvious comparison was the Zealot versus the Zergling. The Zealot is a battle unit, 8 times 2 damage makes 16. He has 36 HP. So if we give a Zealot a +1 upgrade, so he has 9 times 2, 18. Yeah, he can kill a Zergling in 2 damage instances instead of 3, which is extremely potent in a long drawn fight. Like if you think about the time, weapon speed is 0.7 seconds. So he hits per second 0.7 times. That is more than a second that we save to attack something else. And that is the kind of stuff that needs to go into your head. Back to the Marine versus Zergling comparison that I wanted to do. Because the reason why you take Banelings versus Marines, even so they have shields, is they do 34 versus light, which he is light armored. So it doesn't matter how many upgrades a Marine has. 2 Banelings explode, and as you can see, they have a splash area this big. That is 8 to 12 Marines that could be inside of that area if you would stack it perfectly. And 2 Banelings eradicate so many Marines instantly. So this is probably one of the most basic and important things you have to think about when playing in a pro scene. This is why you sit down and grind out stuff. This is why nerds with spreadsheets will even win in sports betting games, because every little percentage, every little bit of value that you can squeeze out is important to get you to what you want, and that is winning, right? Let me ask you something. When you go out there, when you go play your League of Legends, your Counter-Strike, do you play to win, or do you play to improve? Do you know what the difference is? In theory, I have just now given you the tool to extract the knowledge of what is the difference between playing to win and playing to improve. In theory. And that is what I would constantly do. I would try to unlock the knowledge inside of people, or give them spreadsheets of knowledge, or make them aware that something works different than they wanted to. Because back then I used to be a coach. I know how to make a absolutely ridiculously unsmart person win against some of the top players. But if I do that, all I do is I give them knowledge. I have not teach them to learn themselves. This is why I always like let's talk about the YouTuber and streamer Sykkuno. He is not a good player, but he always is open to teach other people, and he's probably a blind guy leading the blind. But one thing he always says, and it is absolutely true, and then again, this is all from my perspective. No extra data, this is just me talking. He always says that when you just tell someone how something works, he will unlearn how to learn. So a lot of things that he does in a trolling matter is actually made so his friends will learn something about the game that he has learned. Of course, adding extra context, he sometimes teaches stuff that is bad because he is not the best player that is out there, which is fine. But it's an interesting method to teach someone without telling him straight up what the solution is. Wait, I said that wrong. He's basically, while, like I said, I'm able to give someone something, and he will be able to beat a pro. Not always, but at minimum have a 40% chance against a pro. That's 4 games won in 10 games. And what Sykkuno's method is the way to develop, to get that, but also develop different stratagems. So, but that is enough talking about him. I just wanted to highlight why I like him. Because I was doing something very similar. I wouldn't do the same thing. I would go and ask the guy, hey, what is your favorite unit? And then I would go and develop a strategy around that unit. And that is not meta at all. Like, what the frick is this? What? You like battle cruisers? Tier 3, hard to get, very expensive unit? How about I teach you how to survive till you get to that point, have fun surviving, maybe adding extra difficulty to your survival strategy, and make you feel rewarded getting to that point, and then having even more fun with your little battle cruiser and devastating the enemy base. That was my way of teaching people. So, I do not want to get hung up too much on that sort of stuff. So, because I actually want to react to this video, right? So, to come back to why, from my perspective, this is a very relevant video to me, is because there are these trends in video games. One thing I do not like about one of my most favorite games, which is the Crisis series. In Crisis 3, you have a bow. You don't have the bow because it's a good weapon, or because it makes sense in that universe. You have the bow in that game because it was a trend for every game. Every game needed a bow or a crossbow at that time. That is why you had a bow in this game. And then we had Battle Royale. Every game needed to have Battle Royales. And then every game needed to have a competitive mode or loot boxes. But today we are talking about competitive modes. Shut up, Snowy. You are talking about competitive stuff, not commercial stuff today. So, yeah, and I think the last thing I need to highlight is romance. I think this is one of the most important things, especially when we talk about games like Escape from Tarkov. This is an extremely hard game. Just like the game GTFO, this game hates you. But why should you play a game that hates you? Because the hate is a certain amount of difficulty. You will have this bone grindy, heavy fights that are mostly stacked against you all the time. Unless you pay attention to very, very little things that could give you an advantage. Unless you do that, you can even see how freaking dark this game is. No competitive shooter would be normally this dark. It is actually extremely important for competitive games to be clearly visible in all aspects, and that is why this hardcore realistic game is very attractive for a lot of people, because it's not competitive. But it's very hard and hones your skills. Also, it gives you that realistic feeling. But I lost a little bit my train of thought for a moment. The point I want to make is simply that if you are a scrub and you play a game that is very hard on you, often just having the feeling of being part of something is enough to keep you going. Like, for example, you can train to run really fast, really far, but you're probably not going to be participating in the Olympics. But should you give up running? Nay. Because running is fun. It's annoying to get to the point where it is fun, but once you reach it, it's really freaking fun. A lot of runners will actually tell you the exact opposite. That running is extremely stressful, annoying, and hard. But just like many sport activities, you work for after the workout. When the so-called runner's high kicks in, when your body suddenly reaches that point where it just does things automatically. I don't know how accurate this is, since my lungs do not allow me to get to this point. But if you I heard that if you run for 10 minutes, if you get to that point, you can run forever, basically. Yeah. And then again, double check that before you take it. Yeah, like I said, romance or thinking that you are part of something that has a certain amount of prestige could make you dream to one day be Diamond, one day be Masters, to be that global elite. Yeah, to be that challenged guy in League of Legends. So going back to mobile games, or the experience of what I saw from mobile games, and they suddenly having every new season every 14 to 19 days, was something that would corrupt my romance I would have with the game. Because I do not have something against seasonal rewards. But I also have a giant strife or anger against games that regularly wipe. One of the best games is Dead by Daylight, which wipes every month, 2-3 months on a regular. Because the progression system is so short that people beat it within a week. And then there's nothing else to do besides enjoying the gameplay. And that gameplay is not that super enjoyable, so they need to wipe to give the player, or to re-give the player something to achieve. But then if you don't play Dead by Daylight that much, why? And you can never really reach the high-end perks or something, like, it's a good old carrot on a stick. You always want to have it reachable. And by just resetting the game more often, not only forces you to create more rewards that are then also becoming less meaningful because everyone is spammed with rewards, so why even go for them? And the guys that do not have that much time do not feel like they are even able to start achieving anything. So yeah, let's react.
Imagine this for a second. An arena full of excited fans waiting to watch their favourite video game. But this hyper-competitive, high-octane electronic sport these guys are playing isn't doing too hot right now. It's been dominated by one incredibly powerful strategy, and the game...
Why does that matter? If you watch a game, you do it for fun. Especially in the current streamer meta. It is not enough to be good at a game. It is actually really bad to be good at a game. The best stat you need to have in a game is to be entertaining. And sure, being good at a game can get you the first third of the way, but then you are in a bigger pack of fries than before. You really need to be dripping and entertaining in streamer meta. That is also why competitive games are actually incredibly boring to watch, because everyone is doing the freaking same shit, which is probably his point. Yeah, like I said, yeah, most efficient tactic available. Like, why wouldn't you do it? You want to win. You want to win the most fail-safe, sure way possible. But still, you don't freeze your fucking waves in League of Legends. What the fuck?
game devolves into long and... Imagine this for a second. An arena full of excited fans waiting to watch their favourite video game. But this hyper-competitive, high-octane electronic sport these guys are playing isn't doing too hot right now. It's been dominated by one incredibly powerful strategy, and the game devolves into long and boring matches with no variation. The commentators, passionate and desperate to keep the game alive, are trying to find any breadcrumb.
One moment. A commentator cannot keep the game alive. That is a script problem. We know what he means, you know. They are struggling to make the game entertaining, even so it's the same old boring shit. So let's keep it real. Okay, I'm nitpicking, sorry.
Boring matches with no variation. The commentators, passionate and desperate to keep the game alive, are trying to find any breadcrumb of excitement that they can, but they know that it's a futile effort. As the tournament goes on, people start to leave the arena, sponsors lose faith in the game, and eventually, the developer's baby and work of passion has been forced to shut down. This scenario is a game developer's absolute worst nightmare, especially in an era where the expectation is that every new multiplayer game release eventually turns into a
So, now I have to elaborate on the point I wanted to make, because now it's become a bigger form failure. This is not a failure of the game, it's more a failure of explanation. So it's a form failure, because if you do not have commentators that even try to make something entertaining, why do you even have them on stage? Once you have commentators that are on stage that do not even know how to make stuff entertaining, you already have failed the entire tournament. So the game is already dead at that point. Like I said, like we know what he says, but it's a bit different than what he said.
This scenario is a game developer's absolute worst nightmare, especially in an era where the expectation is that every new multiplayer game release eventually turns into a hyper-competitive esport. But I feel like that expectation has clouded the judgment of not just a wide part of the gaming community, but even the developers of these games themselves.
I need to listen to it, but I also just read this one. I'm very sorry to Ardrid disrespecting his videos so much, but I'm reading this quote and this is so fucking true. Like, on one side, yes, pros are sitting there and try to get every little bit of advantage inside of a game to win. But Ninja isn't a pro. Ninja is a pro streamer. He is not a pro gamer. He is a pro streamer. It is his job to stream and to entertain. So, what he mostly thinks about is fun. But what a pro in a game does is not to have fun, he is focused on winning the game. But then the third part is the game developers need to keep in mind that pros and pro gamers, they are the top 12%, about that much, yeah. And their main bulk of people playing is like silver and gold, that area, or even bronze, you know. And they make it entertaining for those guys to keep the game alive. Because those top 12%, they can rotate out and be gone. But you need to keep your silver gold players entertained to have the finances to keep running.
Forced to shut down. This scenario is a game developer's absolute worst nightmare, especially in an era where the expectation is that every new multiplayer game release eventually turns into a hyper-competitive esport. But I feel like that expectation has clouded the judgment of not just a wide part of the gaming community, but even the developers of these games themselves. And I can't help but feel like both sides are just missing the point. Just because a game comes out with a multiplayer mode in it doesn't mean it has what it takes to be a competitive game.
And that is what I miss about modern games. That is so true. There's this really neat game called PlanetSide 2, which is a 1,000 versus 1,000 versus 1,000 guys. A three-way of 1,000 players shooting at each other, an epic multiplayer game. And barely anyone even knows that it even existed at some point. Um, and pro gaming always forces the game into a meta. But metas are not fun. I want to play games for fun. And that is what this video is about. Too many people think they know what the best way is, but the best way for a game is the idea that the developer originally had.
Otherwise, we'd be seeing $1 million Mario Kart tournaments crop up everywhere. So what sets Mario Kart apart from, say, League of Legends or Street Fighter? And what makes a good esport? Well, to answer that question, I'll go through the
To make a thought experiment before he answers that question is, what is a sport? Golf is a sport. Kickboxing is a sport. Checkers is a sport. So what is a sport? Because the word in of itself describes a bodily activity, right? Stamina, strength, precision. But golf? You hit a ball a certain distance, sure, but you're even using a tool to achieve that distance. Chess? You ain't even moving your body that much. So what is the difference between something that absolutely exhausts your mind while you do it versus something that stresses out your body, you know? And that is why we have eSports. But eSports doesn't really grip into chess. Because chess, and everyone that plays chess thinks about chess with pieces, with a board, with a table and everything. Not the electric chess that you play in a web browser.
or Street Fighter. And what makes a good esport? Well, to answer that question, I'll go through the reasons people seem to think are true, but really aren't. There's a common notion that rampant dev support is needed for a game to be successful in a tournament setting.
Yes, in a way. A game, we have the luxury through the power of the internet that a game is allowed to receive constant updates and is able to improve itself over time. The point that he is probably gonna make that works against it is that also the idea of keeping... Wait, I should make a more discerned distinction. The idea to keep a game fresh is directly colliding against the idea of making a competitive game. Like I just said, the game needs to be fun for your gold and silver players, not for your high-end players. If you want your game to be long-lasting, you need to get money, and you do not get the money from pro players. So you need to find, like a good joke, the line between pro players and noobs.
That without millions of dollars from the developers and Coca-Cola sponsorships at every event, then your game is just going to die. In reality though, all the developer support can really do is artificially make the game seem like it's alive, when it very likely would be abandoned if there wasn't any monetary incentive to play competitively. Games like Fortnite had to learn this the hard way, because although the Fortnite World Cup had the biggest prize pool in esports history and a massive arena full of rabid children, it still couldn't escape the fact that the game itself doesn't make for a good viewing experience, because all you see is a battle of who gets the luckiest with their weapon drops and which player can build a tower the fastest.
This is actually not the problem. Luck for the drops is not the problem. The second point that he made, where I stopped the video on, is the problem, because the building system is in when you drive a car and you go in and you come to a crossing, the player will know that he will have to turn left, but the viewer will not know if he will go straight, left, or right. So the streamer should move his camera to the side he's going to turn a little bit, so that when he goes into the actual turn, the viewer is already expecting the car to go that way. But Fortnite cannot, or Fortnite build mode, I have to say build mode now since they differentiated that, right? It is a roller coaster of images every time a pro builds a 5-star hotel. And they do it so quick. You get confused, you get motion sick. It is not a good viewing experience. The random loot drop isn't even that important. We have a meta of guns, that is fine, but not every gun is rubbish at range. Like, there are mediocre choices. Like, for example, in Counter-Strike, I always liked the Orc and the Creek, but I got always flamed because, oh my god, you have to pay $600 extra for a scope on a weapon. It's so dumb, but this weapon allows me to scope in, to see small pixel as larger pixels, and also reliably one-shot headshots every of my opponent. I do not need an AWP to do that. And now they have cheapened the price of the scopes, so they are even become more meta now. And now through that change, they are more widely accepted. But man, did I have to fight through a lot of hate. Which is in today's games, I play the UMP 45 and play grenades. And buy the wicked sick crackhead on my team his orb so he can carry me, and I smoke for him and flash for him, and everything else I can use my UMP. Easy peasy.
Of who gets the luckiest with their weapon drops and which player can build a tower the fastest instead of actually shooting the other guy. All you have to do to disprove this is look at the numerous examples where games have had large and passionate communities with little to no dev support, such as the Smash community and pretty much the entire early FGC.
Just look at the background, like where I wasn't able to read anything or even pay attention to the words he was saying because there was so much flashing in the background. Holy crap.
Weapon drops and which player can build a tower the fastest instead of actually shooting the other guy. All you have to do to disprove this is look at the numerous examples where games have had large and passionate communities with little to no dev support, such as the Smash community and pretty much the entire early FGC. These games were, or still are, alive and kicking, with only the passion of a few players and grassroots crowdfunding efforts to keep.
I'm pausing to process the information. Not because it's bad information, but there was so much happening, my brain is overloaded. I don't quite get the passionate point that he's trying to do.
Instead of actually shooting the other guy. All you have to do to disprove this is look at the numerous examples where games have had large and passionate communities with little to no dev support, such as.
Okay, so he's saying he wants, in order to see what is missing in Fortnite, we should orientate ourselves in community loved games. If I understand it right.
There's the Smash community and pretty much the entire early FGC. These games were, or still are, alive and kicking, with only the passion of a few players and grassroots crowdfunding efforts to keep tournaments running. Smash especially shows this fully, considering Nintendo has tried to kill its competitive scene in every way imaginable since its inception. Some people are going to say that fighting game tournaments have had full developer support and big sponsorships for about a decade.
I still am waiting for the point, because he, from what I understand, there's some orientation for the big competitive games in quotation marks. But all he's saying right now is they are having fun. Even so, the game devs try to kill these small games, but they are still having fun. Which is not something that is... you cannot learn from that.
Decade now. So I can't use them as an example because they're using the same things to grow themselves that I say don't grow esports. And although that is true, the devs wouldn't have done much to grow the FGC in the first place if it hadn't had that backbone of passionate grassroots support from the 90s and 2000s. Dev support simply can't prop up a bad esport, and similarly, adding metric shit tons of content to a game through patches isn't going to do that either.
I feel like I missed something.
Efforts to keep tournaments running. Smash especially shows this fully, considering Nintendo has tried to kill its competitive scene in every way imaginable since its inception. Some people are going to say that fighting game tournaments have had full developer support and big sponsorships for about a decade now. So I can't use them as an example because they're using the same things to grow themselves that I say don't grow esports. And although that is true, the devs wouldn't have done much to grow the FGC in the first place if it hadn't had that backbone of passionate grassroots support from the 90s and 2000s. Dev support simply can't prop up a bad esport, and similarly, adding metric shit tons of content to a game through patches isn't going to do that either.
I don't get it. Gotta be straight, I don't get it. Because only this last second where he said adding massive content to a game isn't helping growing it. Because the comparison is the point that I understand he wanted to make is how to grow a competitive sport. And even so, he is trying to play the other side right now, and try to present the bad points as positive as he can. There's nothing to grab. Because passion is an emotion. And emotion doesn't get you far.
Frequent battle passes, skins, new maps, weapons and characters are a common thing to see in modern games, and they admittedly can be a great way to keep adding to a great base game.
Good point, because this is adding more content to a game, but it is non-competitive. Any game can have this. Some of the biggest examples are games like Sims 4, where if you buy everything that is inside of that game doesn't cost $60. The game costs 1,200.
Refining the experience to its absolute best, but they are only at their most
a lot
effective
of extra
if
content.
there aren't any other glaring issues outside of the game's content. It doesn't matter how many skins and characters Multiverses adds, it's not going to fix the server connectivity issues and the lack of modes other than online versus. And you can see the results of that in its dramatic drop in players since.
And that is what irritates me about this section of the video, because he tried to play the other side, but it feels like he didn't really got into the other side, since his points are way too grounded to accept something else. This is just a theory. We still have to see his points, so let's not lynch him right now. We still have to see what his points actually are. But orientating oneself on games that are loved by its community is not a bad way, but he didn't highlight what the reasons were why the people stayed. Like, sure, there's friendship, there's fun in the game, but what is that? You know, it's like you you can put some leftover Coca-Cola into a plant pot, if it's a little bit, because there is phosphoric acid, was it, I think? Something phosphor in it that helps the plant grow. But if you constantly pour cola into a plant pot, it will start rotting because of all the sugar that is in that shit. So, yeah. And that is what he didn't do here. Like, what is this kernel of thing that we should orientate ourselves on? Because all we have seen is loyalty, and not something like, why are they loyal? Why do they like the game?
Its release. If you want a modern game for an example, take CSGO, a game that has had periods of years go by with little to no significant additions to content, at least until Valorant came out. And it is still...
That was such a good clip to explain what a pro player is, this M4 kill. He goes, he shoots, he flicks away. Why does he flick away? Because normally this amount of bullets is enough to kill a player. But for some reason, the game decided at this time, nay, you need one more extra bullet. And that is why he flicked away. And thankfully, the other player wasn't looking, so he was able to come on, brain. To compensate for that variation.
As multiverses adds, it's not going to fix the server connectivity issues and the lack of modes other than online versus. And you can see the results of that in its dramatic drop in players since release. If you want a modern game for an example, take CSGO, a game that has had periods of years go by with little to no significant additions to content, at least until Valorant came out.
And that supports the point about that he doesn't really understand the opposite side, or did a bad job of presenting it. Like, why did people stick to Smash Bros? You know? Like, the Smash Bros scene even has that meme, and has a core following that says, like, the first Super Smash Bros is the Bible. It's the non plus ultra. Only that is a real true Smash Bros.
And it is still one of the biggest and most beloved esports of all time. Having too little content makes a game feel shallow and unfinished, sure, but adding too much content can make a game feel bloated or even negatively impact the game experience if the...
Why is he showing League? Because League does not have that problem. Especially when he shows these champions, because they are some of the most simplistic champions in it. Like, why? I would straight up put Echo here, because Echo was one of the first champions that had this massive skill creep, where a bunch of previous abilities just got crunched and pushed into one character. Like, modern released champions in League of Legends all have these minigames in minigames, which adds complexity, and the more you play them, the more fun they become. Which is the gist of it.
New map or weapon favours a degenerate strategy. Smash 4 was a perfectly fine game that received constant updates including new stages and characters, and these characters added a lot to the game. However, the final DLC character, Bayonetta, ended up ruining the game so badly that Nintendo shipped out an emergency last-minute patch to fix her, which didn't end up doing much, so after they abandoned the game, it turned into such a toxic experience that two 15-year-olds decided to have a standoff in EVO Grand Finals.
Bro, what is going on? What is this? I don't know, I was stalling for time.
And I know...
So first Smash Bros good, now Smash Bros bad? Because, sure, it's one character, But if this game is really liked, like, why do they just ban Bayonetta in these events? Be- Trading card games, in short, TCGs, ban certain cards because they got released from the dev, and the dev didn't really grasp the impact this card had. Like, for example, a card that is still banned in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is Pot of Greed, even though there are so many draw extra cards in the game that Pot of Greed is actually one of the weakest card draw cards to ever have existed. But it's still banned. And that ban is basically a player agreement to not play certain stuff. And you could go with the view of she's in the game, and the game would not be complete if we don't play her. But it wouldn't even interrupt lettering, because the best people that want to become the best orientate themselves first at the best players and play what they play. Why do they do that? Meta. And through that, the meta of the entire game will then agree that Bayonetta is just not played, because it's not played in the top tournaments, so why should I put that card into my deck? Self-regulating player economy.
Patch to fix her, which didn't end up doing much, so after they abandoned the game, it turned into such a toxic experience that two 15-year-olds decided to have a standoff in EVO Grand Finals.
Bro, what is going on? What is this? I don't know, I was stalling for time.
And so in short, this little standoff that we just saw is a Dumbo move, but it is and it isn't, because they wanted to prove a point, but still they have not decided to ban Bayonetta from the tournament. That is like their fault. What can other games learn from that? Nothing. There's nothing to be learned besides that the developer abandoned the game. Like, it's not gonna change the game.
I know what you're thinking. Ardrid, if there's something degen in a game, they should just nerf it. And I fully agree, but let's focus on that point a little more. Because
thought experiment, since it would way too much time to go into it. What is better? To make something weaker that is incredibly strong, or to buff what counters the already strong thing? What would be healthier?
Because all of these big company sponsorships and content altering patches pale in comparison to the most important thing that everyone says a good esport must have: the elusive and ever-desired concept of balance. It's the idea that as many options in the game should be viable at the highest levels of play, and through that, the metagame will be healthy.
Wrong. It is okay to have multiple options, but one thing a lot of people do when they try to define a meta is to say one thing is the strongest thing and it's the only thing you can play, and that is what this is orientated on. Sure, I'm biased because other people that talk about it, they orientate themselves on that, and I have not heard enough about Ardrid to actually say this about him. But through this pretense of other people talking about it, wrong. This is why I teach players around their favorite unit. because they need they, they, they need to learn the game first. You know? Like, what does a Counter-Strike pro do when he has no money in the game? He does not buy the Deagle, even though the Deagle is the best gun in the entire game. Tell me another weapon that, no matter the circumstances, always one-shot headshot kills. Always. No matter the distance. Distance being the key word here. Yeah? Even so, I personally think the P250 is the way better pistol, because bigger mag, less bloom, all of that thing, yeah. But the 250 loses its one-shot headshot potential behind 50 meters. Like, basically Dust 2, everyone knows that map. It's the distance from counter-terrorist spawn to either B side or the other side where the car is and stuff. Around that distance is where the 250 loses its one-shot headshot potential. So, but the Deagle never loses it. It does way too much damage. But then why does no one always go for the Deagle? It is cheap, it will always do the same thing, and all you have to do is click heads. Pretty obvious. It's freaking hard to click heads. So even so, it's the best gun. There are other guns that do similar things, but better. Like, for example, the AUG. No, not the AUG, the AWP. It's the gun that only not... the only way you don't kill your target, besides missing your target, is you shoot it in the foot. Else, that gun always one-shot kills, no matter where you hit. So it's probably one of the strongest guns, but able to kill my target, to bet everything on this one shot, this is dumb. And that is why not everyone in that game buys an orb when he is rich. Like, you need those different roles. I have not completed my point, but I should let the video play a little bit more.
The most important thing that everyone says a good esport must have: the elusive and ever-desired concept of balance. It's the idea that as many options in the game should be viable at the highest levels of play, and through that, the metagame will be healthy and intriguing for the players, and a fascinating experience to watch for the viewers at home.
Okay, to make the line a little bit clearer here. The problem I have with this mindset is that there has to be a lineup of best weapons in order for the game to be healthy, which is just not true. Meta is the experience of players with a weapon to then create the meta, because they have an opinion of that weapon. Like, the dev didn't go and said weapon A, B, and C, those are the best weapons, and no other weapon will be better than those. This is what conflicts with me in this point.
That as many options in the game should be viable at the highest levels of play, and through that, the metagame will be healthy and intriguing for the players, and a fascinating experience to watch for the viewers at home. Balancing a game is always tough, and there's a ton of different philosophies you can use to accomplish it, but the one that has propped up over the last few
What places do we want to encourage? Good phrase. Make everything OP. actually is the best way to go about games, in my opinion. Is balance even important for our game? Conflicting with make everything OP. Yeah, that is a non-sentence. Balance around a particular archetype. It's the same weapon. It's the same quote as is balance important for our game, or what play styles do we encourage? Those bottom two lines are not differentiating from what stays above. Weird space.
Shit. But the one that has propped up over the last few years is the idea of perfect balance, that everything should be as equal as possible for a game to be any fun competitively. But again, if you look at the history, you'll see way too many examples of beloved games that have had varying levels of balance. Smash Bros. Melee, Tekken Tag Tournament 1, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. All of these games are considered to be some of the greatest competitive games in their genre, yet have completely unbalanced rosters where only a small fraction of the characters available to you are viable in tournament play.
And that is basically what I mean. That is the experience with the players and their characters. That is what defines the meta. And it's sadly always that you cannot make a game even 50% balanced. The more characters you have, the more will stand out.
Okay, at this point, some of you might be thinking something like, this guy is such a dumbass. He's making it seem like none of these things matter with anecdotal examples of games that came out 20 years ago that didn't have any of those things. These games didn't have the same standards or lofty expectations that we have now, nor do they have the same level of options that we do now. Players at the time probably just stuck with their game despite being unbalanced or bloated or whatever, right? Wrong. Wait. No!
Comedic relief. Very interesting.
Allow me to disprove that statement with another anecdotal example.
Let me prove his statement real quick. There's this game called Prince of Persia, Warrior Within, which I'm playing every now and then right now, which has quite an in-depth fighting system. But for some reason, games exist like the Callisto Protocol, where they decide to have a almost completely melee-focused combat system, but all you do is press one button. Warrior Within has a 2-button, it's up to 4 buttons, but you mainly press only 2, combat system, and it's hella fun. So why does suddenly Callisto Protocol think it can get away with one button?
Player-based transition from Tekken Tag Tournament 1 to Tekken 4, or the attempted transition, I should say. Let's set the scene. Tekken Tag 1 was considered to be the absolute gold standard of the Tekken series. The pro players loved it, and in just a little over a year, they would be able to play the game's eagerly anticipated sequel, Tekken 4. They waited until the game's release month in the arcades of July 2001, and when they got their hands on it, they hated it. It was slow and weird, and the stages had walls and stuff now, although in hindsight they were really cool. And to make matters worse, it had an equally as unbalanced roster as Tag 1, with new character Steve and especially returning fighter Jin being incredibly oppressive. Tekken 4 matches quickly devolved into Jin vs Jin matches, and the game was as divisive as it could have possibly been.
If I understand the term divisive correctly, it means that the game basically tells you what to do. You do not have really freedom of your own thought. You accept what is in the story, and there's no other possibility of something else happening. Basically robbing the player of any sort of fun or creativity.
Turning fighter Jin being incredibly oppressive. Tekken 4 matches quickly devolved into Jin vs Jin matches, and the game was as divisive as it could have possibly been. Based on this guy's assumption earlier, you'd think that these players would stick with Tekken 4 as this was 2001 and there weren't as many options or as high expectations as we have now for games. Well, actually, the exact opposite happened. After a while of trying to make Tekken 4 work, many Tekken players simply either went back to the horribly unbalanced Tekken Tag 1 or transitioned to other fighting games. Many decided to switch to Namco's other 3D fighter series that had just released a new entry, Soul Calibur 2, a game where the entire roster seemed to be insanely cheap. So why did they go back? Aren't Tekken Tag 1 and Soul Calibur 2 just as bad as Tekken 4 when it comes to cheap characters and strategies? What
Also, like, why wasn't the new game then not able to keep its audience, even though it had way better graphics, you know? Why would they go back?
was the difference between these games that made people hate Tekken 4 so much yet adore Tag 1 and Soul Calibur 2? Well, to answer that question, I think it's finally time to get into the actual things that I think create a great and successful esport. 1. The game needs to be easy to understand and watch. It doesn't necessarily have to be fast paced, but what it does.
This is probably the best one to start with, but in terms of video structure, the worst one to bring in here, because it does not grasp into the game he previously showed, because the new game was easier to watch. It had smoother graphics. It was limiting through the walls. The viewer can easily understand that if someone goes that way, he cannot go any further. So it doesn't fit the structure. His pretext should have been a little bit different.
Does have to be is something that even someone who has never even seen the game before can look at and understand just from a glance. The game's objectives, important elements such as health and damage, and even strategies need to be as easy to understand as possible. As an easy to understand game is going to have a much simpler time bringing in new players than a visual clusterfuck like Fortnite's pro scene. Overwatch has consistently run into this problem with its esports circuit too, where there are just so many particle effects and stuff happening on screen with no downtime whatsoever that it's overwhelming for people who don't understand the game inside and out. 2. A competent and passionate community.
Yeah, like I said, this point is absolutely valid. It's just weird in the video structure. Yeah, so I hope his next video will have a little bit better structure. Passionate and community tournament organized. This is a fanboy moment. Let's go.
And tournament organizers. I'm not talking about some random bog standard event organizer. I'm talking about someone from the community of their game that's passionate and hardworking. Usually someone
like what I straight up don't like about this point, it's the same way meta is formed. Meta is community formed. And the game devs probably thought about what meta would occur and tried to make it as enjoyable as possible. And no one can think of everything, so something unfun always will be released and stuff, you know? Community events can get started by the company, but in the end, it's the people that make it fun. It's not like a TV show where in, I want to say, in a limited room where jokes are pre-drawn, dialogue is pre-texted, and reactions are crafted in a way to be entertaining. Here it's too random. It's just too random. You do not particularly know what sort of people come. And I think, this is such an edgelord take what now comes, but seeing how the people still wear masks is one of the best representations that you do not know what sort of people you get on this convention. So it's better to give everyone the button of you have to wear a mask here instead of relying on the people that are there to be healthy in the first place. Especially if we have something so under the cover like Corona that needs 2 weeks before you even know that you are sick.
2. A competent and passionate community and tournament organisers. I'm not
Wait, I missed that, sorry.
now. 2. A competent and passionate
A competent...
community and tournament organisers. I'm not talking about some random bog standard event organiser. I'm talking about someone from the community of their game that's passionate and hardworking. Usually someone who was a die-hard player themselves who transitioned into TOing. Esports for the most part is not a very profitable industry. So to put on the greatest events on a frequent basis, you need people who are willing to lose money on running tournaments simply for the love of the game. It's what built the early days of Counter-Strike, the FGC, and pretty much every esport that stood the test of time today. If your game's competitive scene can't at some point sustain itself on passion alone, then it has little hope of succeeding in a wider context.
I'm gonna listen to that again, but first I wanna let it sink in for a few seconds. If I understood it right, the game needs to be gripping that people want to keep playing it, which is pretty obvious, but going as far as saying passion is a term that is conflicting with me since we have so many esports games now. Like I said, there was a prestige to the term esports that was created through Counter-Strike and StarCraft Brood War. But this prestige has become widely spread since everyone and their mom now is in some sort of esports event. So yeah.
Frequent basis, you need people who are willing to lose money on running tournaments simply for the love of the game. It's what built the early days of Counter-Strike, the FGC, and pretty much every esport that stood the test of time today. If your game's competitive scene can't at some point sustain itself on passion alone, then it has little hope of succeeding in a wider context. And 3, this one is the most important one. The game's mechanics need to be as perfectly balanced as possible. Some of you are going to say that I'm contradicting myself here, as I literally just said that balance wasn't important, but let's make a key distinction here.
You always need to have some balance. Like people that would even reduce what he said there or discredit him. It's a point you shouldn't even address. But in the spectrum, in the room of this video, you need to address it. But otherwise, it should be common sense. But since this is I would go as far as saying this is a teaching kind of video, it's important to address it.
All of the examples I showed of unbalanced games gaining esports success were unbalanced in their rosters, their weapons, their specific elements in which you interact with the game mechanics. The reason that people preferred Tekken Tag 1 to Tekken 4 despite both games having horribly unbalanced rosters was because Tekken Tag 1's core game mechanics were simply much more balanced than Tekken 4's. Even if Steve and Jin were nerfed into oblivion in Tekken 4, the game would have died anyway because of its broken wall system and stupidly easy jab pressure out of one-frame sidewalks. It wouldn't.
There's a point he forgot to mention earlier. The broken wall system. That, especially since he showed a video, a clip of someone getting absolutely annihilated into a wall. Like, if you look at this, and like it sees like he gets to the wall and gets thrown into the next punch. We in computer terms we would say he's getting animation locked. There's no frame where he could react to what is happening, because the animation does not allow him to react since his character is doing something else.
Broken wall system and stupidly easy jab pressure out of one-frame sidewalks. It wouldn't matter if Bayonetta was never added.
And I need to drive this a little bit further home. That is something he didn't talk about before. That was a problem. That is a problem that game has. but since it wasn't brought up before, the previous comparison wasn't as thorough, and what I said still stands. But it's basically undermined now by this error in the game, or system, I should rather say, since it is not an error that occurs, it is something the developers wanted. But this new wall system, it suddenly makes it really obvious why the players went away. Like the previous one, where a continuous level, where the level would technically loop with each combo and movement. Like you would never meet a wall, since there would be terrain. It wouldn't be generated, but I'm missing a better term for it. Like the map would move in a way around the player that there would always be space to dodge, which the new game wouldn't have. That is massive.
Added into Smash 4 because the game's over-reliance on shielding as an approach option and the strength of grabs would have eventually killed it anyway. And no matter how many balance patches and new heroes they added to Overwatch 1, it didn't stop the massive amount of stuns and the 2-tank meta from scaring people away. And after those things were fixed in Overwatch 2, you can easily see just how much larger and passionate the community has gotten over that game. Unless it's an extreme case, when a character or weapon is overpowered, there are always going to be players who will avoid them by using different characters or weapons. Low tier heroes are a thing in every game, but when the core gameplay mechanics heavily favour a particular strat or playstyle, what are they going to do? Avoid the mechanics?
Yeah, this is directly grabbing in what just was said. Like, it suddenly was something groundbreaking. Like something else that occurred in Smash Bros. Was wave dashing. The oldest game like still had wave dashing. In today's game, it's you are able to pull it off, but it's increasingly difficult and only gives you a small amount of invincibility frames, short iframe. And it was a glitch where if you do a certain amount of moving sets, your character would stop existing on the map for a few seconds. So it's but the concept of iframes was still in it and was vastly known among the fighting game community. So it became a skill to produce this glitch. But then with the newer games, there were the game engine was able to process that construct correctly, and so wave dashing became a thing of the past, which the Smash community didn't like. But it's what happened. The rest of the game still works fine, which is why they kept playing the new games as well.
Avoiding the game's mechanics is basically the same thing as not playing the game at all. So from that perspective, it's obvious just how important a balanced core gameplay loop is. In that sense, the metrics for what make a good esport are very similar to what makes a good game in general. Nobody wants to play a platformer where running and jumping are slow after all. But the problem is, in the pursuit of this esports dream and eternal relevancy, a lot of developers seem to lose sight of that fact. Think about the biggest live service games in the world right now. Relevancy, a lot of developers aren't playing the game at all. So from that perspective, it's obvious just Watch 1, it's important.
Okay, let's review this entire point again, because there's something at the end I missed.
Balanced as possible. Some of you are going to say that I'm contradicting myself here, as I literally just said that balance wasn't important. But let's make a key distinction here. All of the examples I showed of unbalanced games gaining esports success were unbalanced in their rosters, their weapons, their specific elements in which you interact with the game mechanics. The reason that people preferred Tekken Tag 1 to Tekken 4 despite both games having horribly unbalanced rosters was because Tekken Tag 1's core game mechanics were simply much more balanced than Tekken 4's. Even if Steve and Jin were nerfed into oblivion in Tekken 4, the game would have died anyway because of its broken wall system and stupidly easy jab pressure out of one-frame sidewalks. It wouldn't matter if Bayonetta was never added into Smash 4, because the game's over-reliance on shielding as an approach option and the strength of grabs would have eventually killed it anyway. And no matter how many balance patches and new heroes they added to Overwatch 1, it didn't stop the massive amount of stuns and the 2-tank meta from scaring people away. And after those things were fixed in Overwatch 2,
I'm at that point where my subconscious is telling me something is wrong in what he's saying, but I cannot grasp what it is. There's probably a conflict of two examples that essentially that he's comparing two things that have a negative outcome but exist in two different way two different worlds. That is probably what's happening here, which is why I'm going back again to make sure I really get this.
Stupidly easy jab pressure out of one frame sidewalks. It wouldn't matter if Bayonetta was never added into Smash 4, because the game's over-reliance on shielding as an approach option and the strength of grabs would have eventually killed it anyway. And no matter how many balance patches and new heroes they added to Overwatch 1, it didn't stop the massive amount of stuns and the 2-tank meta from scaring people away. And after those things were fixed in Overwatch 2, you can easily see just how much larger and passionate the community has gotten over that game. Unless it's an extreme case, when a character
I don't get it what he is saying. But I will not continue to slow it down since that would break the pacing too much. But I'm gonna concede here that I would probably need to really slow down what he's saying or even write it down to understand. But something isn't right in what he's saying, but I cannot point down what it is.
or weapon is overpowered, there are always going to be players who will avoid them by using different characters or weapons. Low tier heroes are a thing in every game, but when the core gameplay mechanics heavily favour a particular strat or playstyle, what are they going to do? Avoid the mechanics? Avoiding the game's mechanics is basically the same thing as not playing the game at all. So from that perspective, it's obvious just how important a balanced core gameplay loop is. In that sense, the metrics for what make a good esport are very similar to what makes a good game in general. Nobody wants to play a platformer where running and jumping are slow after all. But the problem is, in the pursuit of this esports dream and eternal relevancy, a lot of developers seem to lose sight of that fact. Think about the biggest live service games in the world right now. League of Legends, Valorant, Apex Legends, all of these games seem to be in good states now, but where will they be in 20 years?
This is an extremely horrible comparison. I have to rewind and listen to this part again.
In general, nobody wants to play a platformer where running and jumping are slow after all. But the problem is, in the pursuit of this esports dream and eternal relevancy, a lot of developers seem to lose sight of that fact. Think about the biggest live service game.
My problem is that now that he has made this one point that I don't get, where I have to write down what he's saying to be able to understand it. That he's suddenly using that, and not suddenly, that he's using that point that he wanted to make into the next one. A problem building on another one. But a other thing I can say why this is bad to think about is especially two of the games are Riot games, and Riot has this trend of becoming extremely anime focused. Like in the internet, we have this term for weeps, which are strongly interested anime lovers. And the problem is I'm missing the negative part because I didn't understand it in the last point.
Games in the world right now. League of Legends, Valorant, Apex Legends, all of these games seem to be in good states now, but where will they be in 20 years? Will they even be around in 20 years? If their level of success...
Where does that matter? is this, especially since his examples here were fighting games and mainly fighting games. And suddenly he goes into MOBAs and shooters and asks them where they will be in the next years. Like, there's something called a nostalgia factor, where you will remember something way more proudly or way better than it actually is, and also since you have a lot time invested in it, there's a certain amount of experience you want to get from it. Like, I have in my description saying I will always play the Metro Crisis and Dead Space games. Not only because they are good games, but there's also a massive amount of nostalgia. For example, Dead Space 1 was my first ever horror game. Like real horror game. And the scares I got from that game were so massive that I'm even reliving them today, basically. Like, every time I go through them, like, I don't get scared, but I go, ha, this is where I got scared at one time. On run number 13, this was extremely scary for me. Each time I go into the medical station, man, the first 20 runs, my stomach was hurting so much when I go through here. I wanted to throw up. Like, even so, I'm not experiencing that right now, and my nostalgia for those moments is extremely strong. And then there is this other term of the old guard, where guard, not god, guard, where something is always been there. It's the old school thing. Like, if you want to go into strategy eSports, you probably won't even look for StarCraft 2. You will go to the Brood War section, where because there was a phenomenon where every good player from StarCraft 1 went to StarCraft 2, and when they were done with StarCraft 2, they went back to StarCraft 1. And so the scene of StarCraft 1 is actually more thriving, way bigger than the one of StarCraft 2. Even so, 2 is, in my opinion, the superior game, but the amount of nostalgia and presence from before allows Brood War to exist even to this day. And since he used League of Legends in that example, a game that was almost the first MOBA, but back in the day when we still had Heroes of New Earth competing with League of Legends, and we didn't know which of those will prevail. Like, it is really that freaking old, and people, like the next best comparison I can make is World of Warcraft. People will always return to World of Warcraft because it was the first really good MMORPG, and it has that as a meme over its title. And even if it would become semi-unplayable, people would still go to the game to look at it at the prestige the game once had. That is why League of Legends, Valorant, and Apex do not need to worry about longevity, because they have their spike so deeply driven into the mountain. The game company in of itself would need to try to kill them. They would need active motivation and drastic changes. Like, basically, Apex would need to become an RPG. Yes. Or a strategy game. So drastic would the changes need to be to become to kill that game. Because even Apex 2, I believe, wouldn't be able to undermine Apex. That is that is in a way a problem with free-to-play, but also it's not really that big of a problem. Yeah.
Fact. Think about the biggest live service games in the world right now. League of Legends, Valorant, Apex
Bad
Legends.
examples,
All of these games seem
basically.
to be in good states now.
This is EA. This is Riot. This is Tencent. This is China.
Where will they be in 20 years? Will they even be around in 20 years? If their level of success stays the same, then probably, but I guarantee you the obsession that these games' devs have with constant content updates and frequent balance patches will mean that the Apex of today will look nothing like the Apex of 2042. And what if these changes actually made the game worse rather than better? What will you do then? Play an older version?
Horrible part. Like, I didn't come here to hear about the ending of the world.
Of the game? This isn't Minecraft version swapping. These games require you to be online in order to play them. So it's right.
Let me say it like this. If you were able to see the path of a game where it will end up, you would probably be more worried about where it's going to go. If you're actually unsure of the creativity of what they could do with the game, I would argue that is a good thing. That means that the game is still limitless. You know? Like, I'm not accurate with saying that, but you know, I would feel safer with a game that where I know they could still go a certain way, or they still have room to improve.
Or die
Instead of going, ooh, I do not know. Maybe they are irrelevant in 5 years.
the current version until the devs fix it. And if the game servers get shut down, then tough luck. You are never playing this game again.
Also, horrible point. Like I just said, they are so old. Especially, why would Tencent ever shut down League of Legends? Why? If you haven't heard, Arcane Season 2 is supposed to air 2023, I think. They are gonna get such a big boost of that series. Even so, I predict Season 2 to be extremely inferior to its first season. But yeah, we're can talk about that another time.
Online in order to play them. So it's ride or die with the current version until the devs fix it. And if the game servers get shut down, then tough luck. You are never playing this game again. When talking about game preservation, everyone
One last thing. This is a ridiculous point, but I just wanna go over the top to make it sure why this is a non-problematic point. Why would the government ever switch off electricity? You know?
mentions the old are never playing this game again. When talking about game preservation, everyone mentions the old classics that require aging hardware to run. But what about the hundreds of live service games that require massive servers to run and have had so many content patches that the version of the game you played as a kid may not even be available anymore? I don't think that eSports itself has ruined gaming. Far from it. I love eSports myself, but the mentality and glorification of eSports that it puts the community and devs into definitely has. It isn't because ranked has caused tryhards to pop up everywhere and I can't 360 no-scope noobs anymore like back in the good old Modern Warfare 2 days, but because game devs all over the world look at the prestige and deep competitive history of games like League of Legends and Street Fighter, and they lust for it so hard that they fail to see the mountain that they had to climb to reach that peak. And the true reasons why people play those games is that they are amazing, mechanically well-balanced experiences that allow for deep and engrossing gameplay. It's not million-dollar prize pools and frequent content updates. And the furious chase of this ideal is simply not smart for most games that aren't really made for esports. A competitive scene has to be gradually built by die-hard fans out of true passion for the game. And just like
I have a good point for him, but before that is, What makes someone a die-hard fan? I'm gonna make a point for him after this video.
Like how you can lead a horse to water and you can't make it drink, you simply can't force a game to be an esport. And as long as the gaming community keeps trying to do that, more and more games will fail to reach their true potential.
I like this video a lot. Even so, I've been pretty hard on it. We have been going here for 1 hour and 40. So, the most important thing for a competitive game, please note, this is my opinion. I don't want to repeat this all the time. Why did I even state that it's my opinion? Man. The coolest thing about competitive game, no matter what genre, is each time you play it, you can see self-improvement. One thing these games have is that you can be 100% self-reliant and create a win rate that is high enough to climb. Yes, I even had to engineer that sentence mid-sentence because of mobile games. But if you want to be competitive in games that are team-based, like League of Legends, it's so hard to be competitive in them since there are 4 random factors alone on your team. You don't know how they will perform. And then 5 extra factors on the enemy team. League of Legends is probably one of the worst games to start to be competitive, since there's so much extra random data that will irritate you. But I would personally recommend strategy games or pure 1v1 games, because everything is just focus on you, every mistake is yours, and it feels so good to feel that you have improved. You do not, you still do mistakes. That's the only reason why the enemy is winning. Yeah. Because he outplayed you, he benefited on one of your mistakes, but you are doing the same. And you have strongly reduced the amount of mistakes you did. And it feels so nice. And even in Counter-Strike, in theory, you can 1v5 every game, in theory. I wouldn't put it on anyone to really have it that so much stress every game. That would be ridiculous. But you still can have statistics or goals to that you at least kill 2 of the enemies each round, or survive each round. And that is so simple things will show you how you improved in that game. But that is what builds passion for me. But I really do not like the emotional wave in this video. Story games need emotions. But then, on the other hand, I also don't understand fandom. Being a fan of a football club, for example, and cheering them on. But that is more a thing that is on me. I don't know, suddenly force people to explain themselves to me because they like a rock star. They like a person. And that's just good enough for me. But building a community and having that community carry a game, I don't think that is a good basis to make a good eSports game. That is a game like DayZ, like The Sims. Any game out there that has huge amount of modding for a game. Modding, the thing you do not want in a competitive game. You want people that want to prove themselves and want to improve themselves all the time. Go to a pro player and ask him if he is good at a game. What answer do you get? That's right. None of them will say that they are good at a game. They will say they will be better than others. Yeah, that's true. Because it's important to have an ego. So,